nightmares seeping into real life, demonic creatures breaking into people's homes, haunted places that will have you believing that you're in the underworld. Today's episode is full of creepy tales that you don't want to miss, encounters that you'll pray you never experience yourself. So cross your fingers, hoping that you stay safe and normal after you catch these allegedly true horror stories of the supernatural. If you have a story of your own, share it with us at darknessprevails.org. Yeah, the website is back up where you can listen to the podcast, submit your stories, and read other people's stories. Now, on to the show. That Old Louisiana House, from KAYLI G. Years ago in Louisiana, I was staying with my friends in an old house in the middle of nowhere. Back then, nothing scared me too much. I used to believe that there wasn't anything that I couldn't handle myself. But at the time, I needed a place to stay and my options were limited. But what are friends for? Now, this house was very well known for being haunted, but I didn't believe it. I didn't believe in the supernatural, didn't believe in mysterious creatures or the paranormal. But that would soon change for me when I finally saw for myself what could happen when you mess with things you don't understand. It took no time at all for things to go awry. Pictures falling out of nowhere, noises throughout the house, cabinets flying open and dishes falling out of the cabinets. For a long time, I would blame it on things like the house shifting or being off balance, something like that. You might be thinking if the dishes flying around the kitchen wasn't enough for me to say screw this, then what would be? Well, me and my friends had the genius idea to hold a seance in the house. We did the whole shebang. A darkened room, candles all around, holding hands in a circle. I thought it was funny, but many of us were taking it seriously. We tried speaking to the so-called spirit. And I remember making a joke, something along the lines of, "If I died right now, I would teach you a lesson." Again, it was really just a joke to me, and I didn't believe any of it. But I now know that what I said pissed something off. Because moments after this, the candle's flames began to flicker like crazy, and the loudest roar echoed around us. When everything went quiet again, we all sat there for the next 2 or 3 minutes, before even more terrifying noises began. It sounded like something huge was walking down the hallway. Something that big wouldn't even fit in the hallway. As these footsteps began to approach us, we all ran out of the house terrified, even me. After that experience, my friends were convinced to move out, and I was convinced that some things you just can't explain. After all, maybe there is something beyond our own world, beyond this dimension, and sometimes they get angry. If I learned anything from this experience, it would be it's best not to mock what you don't understand. I saw a black-eyed boy, from Sandy F. It was August 2006. I was living in a nice little town called Phoenixville. At the time, I shared an apartment with someone. It had a nice yard and a beautiful tree in that yard, so it wasn't uncommon for kids to come by, asking to play in the yard and climb the tree. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But one evening, one child is etched into my mind forever. I was in the kitchen that night when I heard a knock on the screen door. I looked out the window first to see who it was. What I saw was a small child. What I noticed first was that I didn't recognize the kid, and he was wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up. When I went to the door to greet him, the first thing I said was, It's a little hot for a hoodie, don't you think?" He didn't reply to this. Instead, he just stared at the ground. I began to feel nervous, so I said, "If you're here to play, go ahead. I don't mind." But as I was turning around to let him go about his business, he said something. "No, I need to come inside. I need to use the bathroom. Can I come inside?" This sent chills down my spine. I turned around and saw that he was closer to the screen door now. I nervously said, "I apologize, but I don't let people I don't know in the house. Please go use the bathroom at your house, or at least ask one of the neighbors, but you can't use it here." But he insisted. "You have to let me in. Invite me inside." Just before I began to approach the doorway to shut the door, he said without looking up, "Don't shut it." I froze. That's when he lifted up his head. I could see his short black hair, unnaturally pale skin, and enormous black eyes. I felt like I stared at him for an eternity, until my cat shook me out of my stupor by hissing and growling at the door. I took the moment to shut the door as fast as I could. I locked it before the boy began to pound on the door, harder than a child that small could. I began to shout that I was calling 911. Then he stopped, and I think he left, but he left something behind. Something that made me extremely paranoid and nervous at all times. I was so scared of leaving the apartment for the next month that I didn't. I would ask friends or family to bring me food or groceries. When I finally had the courage again to leave my home, for the next few months after that, I always felt like I was being watched. I decided to put a sign up in my yard, letting people know that they could no longer enter my yard. I had nightmares for the next 4 years, too. I would always see that kid in my head every night. We would be in some playground. He would look at me and ask why I didn't let him in. I never saw the kid again, but the fear is still here even after all these years. I do not know what he was or why he affected me so. I don't know if I could take it if I opened my door again and saw him standing there. Early Morning Skinwalker from Cody S. This is a story from my childhood. I was 10 and my little sister was 9. I had an encounter that horrified me, and every time I tried to tell someone, they would tell me I was a child with an overactive imagination. But now, even as an adult, I know these stories to be true. It all started when my little sister began to say she was seeing and hearing things. She said that she saw black figures close to the windows at night. She said that these dark men would ask her to let them inside. She said they scared her, and that she would just cover her head and try to ignore them. Upon telling this to my mother, she wouldn't believe her, so she came to me with these creepy stories. I wanted to trust my sister to make her feel better about this situation, but I was skeptical, to be honest. I mean, boogeyman outside the window? It just sounded like a story someone told my sister and scared her with. Even still, I wanted to help, so I would check the doors and windows and lock them if they weren't locked already every night, letting her know that everything was safe. After the first night though, it was kind of eerie when my sister said that they came back and they were angry now that the doors and windows were locked. I tried not to let that get to me. Years go by, my sister continuously talking about these dark men, and I still hadn't seen them for myself, until I finally had my first encounter with them. My sister began to open the windows at night. I'm not sure why she was doing this, but as the breeze was beginning to chill my room, which was next to hers, I woke up in the middle of the night and went to go ask her to put it back up. What I didn't expect when I entered her room that night was to see a tall, dark figure standing above her. It was as tall as the ceiling, looking down with one claw-like arm hanging over her head. I immediately screamed. The thing jumped out the window in one fluid, unnatural motion, and my sister looked at me, saying, "Why did you scare him away?" It was then that I realized that everything my sister had been saying was true, and I no longer felt safe out here in the middle of the woods in this little house. But I know my sister would continue to open that window at night. The only thing that was different was I was too terrified to go and confront her about it, because I heard things outside my door. Things that asked why I wouldn't let them in, why my door was locked. I convinced my parents to nail her window shut, lying about her sneaking out at night. And I thought that would be the end of it. But contrary to what I believed about these figures, was that they don't come out just at night. One afternoon, I was walking along a trail near our home, one that went into the woods and circled the property. It was a nice area to walk and to take things off your mind, but I stumbled upon something in there that I won't soon forget. A clearing just off the path caught my attention because there was something darker than the night standing there in the middle of the day. It seemed to be tugging and chewing at something on the ground, a dead animal of some kind. When I saw it, I gasped, completely surprised to see something that unnatural. Then it looked at me with white eyes, shrieked at me, then ran away. I had never run so fast before to get back home. I ran back into the house and swore I would not take that trail anymore. A couple of years later, when we finally moved, I couldn't be happier, because nothing was more torturous and terrifying than living in that stupid house. When the Moon is Full, from Black Cat Ninja. I grew up loving the outdoors. I would spend a lot of my time outside with my dad, often camping. This happened around fall one year. All the leaves had turned that beautiful fiery orange. I was playing outside on the edge of the forest as we lived very close to it. I was running around, pretending to be flying an airplane. That's when I saw the strangest thing. These bunches of yellow eyes staring at me through the tree line. I froze when I saw it. I was instantly afraid, and I remembered that old saying that wild animals could smell your fear. My spine began to tingle, and my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I ran back to the house, afraid of what I might see jumping out of that forest at any moment. About a week after this, my dad and I were planning a camping trip in those very same woods. When the time came, we wandered deep inside the forest, finding an ideal spot. It didn't take long for me to begin to notice a bunch of claw marks on the trees around us. But my dad said it was just bears, though his expression was one of confusion and concern. Later on, my dad was pitching the tent. As I was more in the way at the time, I decided to explore the woods a bit, still a bit wary from that experience before. And of course, to make things even more eerie, I stumbled upon a half-eaten raccoon. I reported this to my dad as well, who naturally said that this was normal. We were in the middle of the woods after all. As night came near, we got inside the tent. I fell asleep early. I woke up a few hours later, my dad snoring next to me. I realized that I needed to use the bathroom. I got up, exiting the tent and trying my best not to wake up my dad in the process. I grabbed the flashlight, then reluctantly found a tree as close to the remaining embers of our fire as possible. I was about to do my business when I suddenly stopped. I noticed something that gave me chills. A sort of gurgling sound coming from the nearby trees, followed by growls, as if whatever was making the gurgling sound noticed that I was there, and it didn't like that one bit. It took me a moment to locate the sound, and when I did, I was met with a dreadful, bristling mass of gray fur. It stood on all fours, and it was leering at me with pure hatred in its eyes. I had no idea what kind of animal I was looking at. It was like a malformed dog, certainly not a bear, not with those teeth that seemed to come from the bottom and protrude outwards over the top lip. Whatever it was terrifying to behold, and plenty big enough to probably bite me in half. As I stood there quivering, it hit me. Those eyes were the same yellow eyes I'd seen in the woods that day, meaning I'd seen this thing before, and there were more of them in these woods. I ran so fast back to our little fragile tent that everything was a blur of tears and wilderness speeding past me. I have no idea how I made it back to the tent without being attacked or annihilated, but I did, and I immediately woke up my dad. He didn't seem to believe me, or he was more tired than anything, until we heard the howl coming from just outside the tent. We went quiet and waited for that massive creature to walk back into the forest, leaving us alone and terrified. Ever since then, I have not felt the same amount of fear as I did that night when I saw those yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. It's been a long time since then, and I've moved far away, but these days, I don't enter the woods without a firearm. It Stalks Me, from Frank the Jarhead. I was in high school, and I was not an extremely religious person, but I did believe in God. And as such, I believe the paranormal is a very real thing. There are things in this world that will remain to be unexplainable, things that nobody can comprehend. I'm not entirely sure if this is one of those things, but it definitely feels like it. It all began a couple of weeks ago, relatively small, really. I'd sometimes wake up with small scratches and cuts on my arms and body. I thought nothing of it until I began to get bruises on my palms and knuckles, followed by extremely painful cuts and bruising on my arms. I tried to see if I was sleeping wrong or doing something to myself in my sleep, but even when recording myself, I never found anything. Then one night, I had a very dark and disturbing dream, one that really shook me. A dream of my sister being brutally tortured by a tall and slender woman-like thing. It was an entity that I'd never seen before. The female thing laughed as she put my sister through the worst pain imaginable, and hearing her laugh, it made something inside me snap. Suddenly, my body begins to change and twist and morph painfully, until I become something muscular with long limbs, gray skin, and patches of black fur, and I begin to chase after her. She somehow looked more terrified than my sister she was just torturing. Then, in the most disgusting, moist way, I devoured her. I woke up in a terrible sweat, my heart pounding. It took me hours to calm down and fall back to sleep, but those images were burned into my mind. The following day, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone in the middle of the night. Then I freeze, because out of the corner of my eye, where my eyes could barely see any longer due to the brightness of my screen, I could make out a figure that was terribly familiar. It had long legs, gray skin, and patches of black fur. I was too terrified to move. My mind was repeating the same phrase over and over. This couldn't be real. I wanted to pinch myself, because this had to be a nightmare, right? Whatever the thing was, I felt like I knew it, and that it knew me. But it was definitely malicious. I could feel a burning rage and hatred just pulsating off of it from here. The texture of my room was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. We stood there still, it looking at me, and I looking at my phone for probably an hour, before I eventually forced myself to move. I jerked my head suddenly in its direction, and it faded away. It was like it was never there, though I promise I saw it, flesh and all. I just don't know what to make of these dreams and figures. How is the woman entity connected to the beast? And why are they appearing before me? Is there something wrong with my head? Or is my body, my mind, being ravaged by two different demonic things? Strange Happenings from BPP26. I've always been interested in the unexplained, but I never thought I'd experience something for myself. About 2 years ago, when I was 14, I had a sort of first job. I worked with my mother, who was a dental assistant at an old dental office, and I helped her with things. I mostly did all of the cleaning of the rooms and instruments. I would also take out the trash and do filing for the patients and information. It was an okay job with okay pay. However, I never liked the feeling I received every time I would enter the old office. It wasn't necessarily a completely negative feeling, but it was an odd one, as if someone was watching me from the shadows. The feeling would become worse every time I was alone in the building, which is why I didn't like working there, or being there alone. Unfortunately, sometimes I had to be. Small things began about a month after I started working there. Things like finding instruments in places I know I hadn't left them, or doors being open when I know for a fact that I had closed them moments ago. Plus that odd feeling of being watched. Add that all up, and I often hated it. I tried to ignore it as best I could, telling myself I was tired, stressed out. But then things only progressed. One afternoon, my mother was over at the next door gas station, getting us something to snack on, so I was alone at the time. I was busy taking out the trash and putting a new bag in the can when I felt that odd feeling becoming a little stronger than usual. As I often did, I tried to ignore it, focusing on the trash, but my heart was beginning to race as I felt like someone was right behind me. Just as I was about to turn around, I felt what seemed like a cold hand stroke my hair. I jumped, turning around immediately, expecting to see my mother. But the room was empty. Confused and heart still racing, I walked throughout the office calling for someone, but there was no one there to answer me. No one at all. Another afternoon, I was vacuuming by the front entrance while my mother was doing things on her computer in the office. Once I was done vacuuming, I bent down to grab the cord, then I wrapped it around the vacuum to put it away, when I suddenly felt as if I bumped into someone. I nearly fell forward. I stood up to look behind me, expecting to see a wall or a table or something, or even a client that had snuck up on me. But again, there was no one there. Nothing at all for me to run into, let alone trip over. I still tried to dismiss this as nothing and continued on with my day. However, the whole rest of the day, I felt like someone was right behind me again, staring daggers into my back. The most terrifying and unexplainable experience of all, though, happened one morning while I was again vacuuming by the front entrance. I was getting ready to vacuum down the hall when I looked up and saw a completely black silhouette of a person very cautiously poking his head out from one of the rooms. Upon noticing me, the figure snapped its head back into the room and out of view. It all happened so fast, I was shocked, and I was still trying to process what I had just seen. A ghost? Demon? I didn't know for sure. I refrained from talking about it or telling this to anyone, for fear of people thinking that I was crazy, or just a storyteller. But I know I saw something. The months after that experience, strange things continued to happen to me, but none could compare to seeing what I saw. Long after quitting that job due to extracurricular activities at school, I finally decided to bring up my strange happenings to my mother, who shared a few of her own that I didn't even know she had. Turns out, before her dental office was even a dental office, it was someone's home. My mother didn't know about the occupants other than they left one day and never came back. My mother thought it might have been because they couldn't afford to live there anymore, but I'm none too sure. Anyway, my mother told me that strange things would happen to her while she was there. She would hear doors creak open and slam shut. Lights would flicker or be turned on in rooms. Things would be misplaced, and she too always felt like she was being watched, whether she was with someone or alone. I believe now that part of the reason she wanted me to work with her was to have someone there with her because she was so creeped out. To this day, I don't know exactly what I encountered working at that dental office, but I know it had to have been paranormal. This world is truly strange, and strange happenings are a daily occurrence. Well, this additional reason for being scared of the dentist brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Now you might understand my conundrum. Sure, clean and healthy teeth are nice, but what do you do when the shadow man keeps sticking his fingers in your mouth? Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story of your own you want to share and hopefully have it narrated, share it with us at darknessprevails.org. If you want to support the show, you can do so with the links below. There's a link to my Patreon and a link to my merch store for some creepy cool merchandise. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video, titled, "How Can I Sleep When Someone is Watching? 5 True Horror Stories." Optic says, "If I'm not in the next video for the early comments, I'm going to throw up. I'll grab the towel. Gross." The Forlorn Bat says, "It's hard to sleep when someone's watching, unless you're Bella Swan. But the catch is you have to be a sexy, sparkling vampire." Fight the Assimilation says, "I love watching your videos, Darkness. I hope you're feeling better." I feel great now, just got a really runny nose. You can probably hear it in this video. Zeppelin Girl 86 says, "It's very interesting to wake up to a toddler staring at you." Yeah, especially if you don't have one. And Herobrine 854035 Max says, "The creepypasta music I found you told me isn't the same music you use, Darkness Prevails." That's a really confusing sentence to say. Also, it is. Maybe you're not looking hard enough. My music comes from Coag on YouTube, Miyuji on YouTube, epidemicsound.com, which you have to pay for, or incompetech.com. Recently, I've been making my own music, so you'll start to hear that too. But that should be on my channel on Dark Music, and you can use it for free. Discover for yourself. I'm giving you everything you need to find it. Here on out, it's up to you what you find or can't find. And Miss Creepypasta Boo says, "Please let this be early enough. I love your videos. Hashtag scary as life." Thank you, Boo. And hashtag scary as death would be true too. Well, this is the end, but don't be too scared, because more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're great people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.